My stepmom tried to steal my inheritance. My lawyer's single call made her entire scheme collapse. The air in the solicitor's cramped office was thick with the scent of old paper and stale coffee, a fitting backdrop for the drama unfolding. Morwenna, my stepmother, was practically vibrating with a smug satisfaction that bordered on manic. Her perfectly styled blonde hair, usually a symbol of her meticulous control, seemed to shimmer with her barely contained triumph, almost a halo of deceit. She leaned forward, her emerald eyes, usually cold and calculating, now glinting with a predatory glee that sent a shiver down my spine, quickly suppressed. "It's settled then," she announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, a saccharine coating over a bitter truth. "Lysander, dear, I truly regret that your father's finances were in such disarray. The debts, the unexpected clauses, it's a tragedy, really. But as his devoted wife, and now the administrator of his estate, I simply must ensure everything is handled responsibly. Which, regrettably, leaves very little, if anything, for you." She paused, letting her words hang in the air like a guillotine blade, deliberately drawn out to maximize impact. Her gaze, laden with condescension, bore into my face, searching for the raw wound of defeat. She expected tears, outrage, perhaps even a desperate plea. She expected Lysander, the quiet, reserved digital archivist, to shatter. A flicker of triumph ignited in her eyes, anticipating my collapse. But I offered her nothing. My expression remained as unreadable as ever, a placid mask that belied the intricate machinery of thought whirring beneath. I simply met her gaze, a small, almost imperceptible flicker in my eyes, neither anger nor despair, but something she couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps it was a shadow of long-held amusement, a hint of something profoundly unsaid. The solicitor, Mr. Davies, cleared his throat, his face a picture of escalating discomfort, but I merely shifted in my seat, my posture relaxed, almost too relaxed. Morwenna, blinded by her own perceived victory, missed the subtle cues, the quiet confidence that settled around me like a bespoke suit, perfectly tailored for this moment. She had just declared her victory, a premature one, not realizing that I held the one piece of information, the one precise key, that would make her entire, elaborate scheme unravel like a cheap sweater. Her single-minded greed had made her predictable, and my late father, a man of profound wisdom and foresight, had anticipated her every move with a chilling precision. My father, Arthur, had always been a man of quiet strength, a master craftsman by trade, but an amateur historian and philosopher by passion. He taught me the value of meticulousness, the beauty of unseen connections, and the quiet power of patience. Our home, a rambling old house filled with antique books whose pages smelled of history, and his exquisitely crafted wooden furniture, was not just a dwelling but a sanctuary of learning and quiet contemplation. I, Lysander, was his only child, and from a young age, I absorbed his lessons like a thirsty sponge. My interest in digital archiving, a field that demanded precision, an understanding of hidden data, and the art of connecting disparate pieces of information, stemmed directly from his influence. He often spoke of leaving a legacy, not just in financial terms, but in the enduring lessons he imparted and the unshakable integrity he embodied. My mother passed away when I was young, leaving a void that felt immense, a silence in the heart of our home. For years, it was just my father and me, a perfectly balanced universe, a quiet symphony of shared curiosity and mutual respect. Then, Morwenna entered our lives a decade ago. She was a whirlwind of glitz and superficial charm, a stark, jarring contrast to our quiet existence. At first, she seemed to genuinely care for my father, or at least, she was a masterful actress, weaving a web of feigned affection. He, perhaps seeking companionship in his later years, was taken by her manufactured vivacity. I, however, with the quiet observational skills my father had always nurtured, saw through her from the start. I noticed the way her eyes lingered on his financial statements a beat too long, the subtle, almost imperceptible questions she'd weave into casual conversations about his estate, the way she'd subtly belittle my career choice as boring or unprofitable, compared to her own vague investments designed to impress. My relationship with Morwenna quickly soured, a festering wound she delighted in poking. She saw me as an obstacle, a drain on my father's resources, and a constant, inconvenient reminder of his cherished past. Her attempts to drive a wedge between us were relentless, insidious, like a slow poison. She'd twist my words, misrepresent my intentions, or simply omit facts to present me in the most negative light. I rarely engaged, choosing instead to retreat into my studies and work, observing her machinations with a detached, almost scientific curiosity. My father, however, always saw through her ploys. He was a shrewd man, far more intelligent and perceptive than Morwenna ever gave him credit for. He never confronted her directly in my presence, protecting my peace, but he often shared cryptic remarks with me, like a silent, knowing wink. A true inheritance isn't just what's visible, Lysander. It's what's protected, what's earned, and what's out of reach for those who don't understand its true value. Or, with a grim humor, always have a backup, son. And a backup for the backup. Especially when dealing with ambitious people. As my father's health began to decline a few years ago, the shadow of his mortality seemed to embolden Morwenna. Her machinations intensified with a chilling urgency. She began isolating him, controlling his visitors, intercepting phone calls, attempting to sever his connections to the outside world. It was during this period that my father, with a grim determination that shone in his fading eyes, began preparing for what he clearly anticipated would be a legal battle after his passing. He called me to his study one evening, his voice weak, but his eyes sharp and resolute, burning with a final purpose. He detailed the extensive assets he had accumulated, explaining how he had meticulously structured his will to protect my inheritance from anyone with ill intent. He specifically mentioned hidden trusts, a particular offshore bank account, and a series of coded instructions for me, disguised within what appeared to be mundane digital files, old family photos, recipe documents, a collection of forgotten poems. He made it clear that while Morwenna would have immediate access to a portion of his assets for her temporary comfort, the bulk of his estate, the true inheritance, was intended for me, safeguarded by complex layers of legal and digital protection. She will try to bypass it, Lysander, he had warned, his voice raspy, a hand reaching out to squeeze my arm, a silent plea for me to remember. She will see weakness. She will fabricate debts, claim expenses, exploit every perceived loophole. She believes she is smarter than everyone else. Let her believe it. Your strength lies in your quiet observation, your meticulous nature, and your ability to follow instructions precisely. I've left you a trail, a series of breadcrumbs that only you can follow. And you'll need the right guide. That guide was Elias Thorne, a lawyer my father had known and trusted for decades, a man whose reputation for quiet tenacity preceded him. Elias was a quiet man, much like myself, but possessed a mind like a steel trap, capable of dissecting the most convoluted legal labyrinths. My father had arranged for us to meet months before his passing, giving Elias a sealed envelope to be opened only if certain conditions were met after his death, specifically, if Morwenna attempted to contest the will or seize assets disproportionately. My secret weapon was not just Elias, nor merely the hidden trust, but the symbiotic combination of my father's almost prophetic foresight, Elias's unparalleled legal acumen, and my own unique digital archiving skills, which allowed me to cross-reference fragmented information my father had subtly left for me. I began meticulously cataloging every financial document, every email, every casual conversation where Morwenna discussed my father's finances. I archived everything, digitizing even the most innocuous physical notes, creating a fortress of data. It was a tedious, painstaking process, requiring immense discipline and a quiet, burning resolve, but it was exactly the kind of work my father had prepared me for, a silent battle fought in the digital shadows. I spent countless hours in the quiet solitude of my study, sifting through data, building my own parallel archive, a shadow record of Morwenna's burgeoning greed. This meticulous preparation, born from a lifetime of my father's teachings and my professional discipline, was the shield I would eventually use, forged in quiet determination. Following my father's passing, the initial period was a blur of profound grief and overwhelming legal formalities. Morwenna, predictably, wasted no time. Her initial moves were subtle, cloaked in feigned concern and a veneer of administrative diligence. She claimed she was streamlining my father's accounts, consolidating funds, and addressing outstanding financial obligations. I watched her, silently, my heart aching with both sorrow and a growing, cold determination, as she began to execute the exact plan my father had predicted. She started by subtly inflating household expenses, then moved to claiming significant, undocumented, personal loans my father had supposedly taken from her, which she now needed repaid. She presented fabricated invoices, forged signatures, badly, to my trained eye, a clumsy insult to my father's memory, and a litany of financial demands that quickly began to chip away at the estate's liquid assets, like a parasite draining its host. I played my part perfectly, maintaining my reserved nature, appearing overwhelmed by grief and the complexities of legal matters. I allowed her to dictate the narrative, to present her fabricated figures to Mr. Davies, the solicitor handling the initial estate administration, watching her dig her own grave, brick by painstaking brick. When she demanded inventories, I provided them, perfectly organized, but always with a quiet, almost imperceptible omission, a subtle misdirection that diverted her attention from the true heart of the inheritance. When she asked for access to specific digital files, I supplied them, but always the decoy files, the ones my father had prepared for this very purpose, designed to look important, filled with red herrings, while the real data remained hidden in plain sight, encrypted within innocuous-looking family photos or old recipe documents, accessible only with the specific decryption keys my father had entrusted to me, codes only I could break. Her arrogance grew with each perceived success, a suffocating cloud of self-importance. She saw my quietness as weakness, my compliance as naivety. Poor Lysander, she'd often lament to seemingly sympathetic ears, always within my hearing, her voice dripping with mock pity. He's just not cut out for this. So fragile. So unworldly. She believed she had me precisely where she wanted me, emotionally vulnerable, legally unsavvy, and completely outmatched. She became bolder, her demands more brazen, her actions increasingly reckless. She even started selling off pieces of my father's furniture, sentimental items carved by his own hands, claiming they were necessary to cover urgent bills. Each act was like another thread she was weaving into her own noose, each one meticulously documented by me in my hidden digital archives, the silent record of her downfall. I met with Elias Thorne in secret, usually at a nondescript coffee shop far from my home, a place of quiet anonymity. I would bring him a secure tablet full of time-stamped evidence, cross-reference documents, and the digital breadcrumbs my father had left, a tapestry of deceit meticulously unraveled. Elias, with his sharp, analytical mind, would quietly review everything, his glasses perched on his nose, his lips pressed into a thin line, a grim satisfaction slowly forming on his face. "She's following the script perfectly, Lysander," he would say, a quiet intensity in his voice. "Let her dig deeper. Let her commit fully. The deeper she goes, the harder she falls." He advised me to cooperate, to appear helpful, even to express a mild, feigned confusion about the complexities of the estate, like a spider letting its prey wander deeper into the web. The Zygarnik effect was at play here, not just for Morwenna, but for me. The unfinished task of her deception, the escalating nature of her lies, kept me hyper-focused, my mind a finely tuned instrument of justice. And for Morwenna, her perceived, almost success, urged her on, blinding her to the increasing risks. The curiosity gap was what I aimed to create for her, the tantalizing possibility of total victory, just out of reach, pushing her to overcommit, to shed caution. She was so convinced she was on the verge of claiming everything that she grew careless, her fabrications becoming increasingly shoddy, her signatures more clumsily forged. She was, in essence, building her own elaborate, self-incriminating case, unaware that every brick she laid was being meticulously documented by me for the prosecution. She was so certain there was nothing I could do, that she had won, and that overconfidence was her greatest, most fatal vulnerability. The climax arrived, not in a dramatic courtroom showdown, as one might expect from a tale of high stakes and betrayal, but in a surprisingly subdued setting, much to Morwenna's eventual, devastating chagrin. It was a final, mandatory estate meeting, ostensibly to review the final accounting, and distribute the remaining assets. Present were Mr. Davies, Morwenna, her own newly appointed, rather junior solicitor, and of course Elias and myself. Morwenna, resplendent in a designer suit that screamed victory, sat across from me, a triumphant smirk playing on her lips, her eyes gleaming with anticipated conquest. She had done her homework, or so she thought. She had prepared a detailed report, full of intimidating figures and legalese, designed to overwhelm me and the solicitor, a final, crushing blow. "As you can see, Mr. Davies," she began, her voice ringing with false authority, a performance honed to perfection, "the estate is, regrettably, largely depleted. My husband, bless his generous soul, had several undocumented debts and obligations that I, as his loving wife, have taken it upon myself to clear. The remaining assets, once all these urgent matters are settled, are minimal. Consequently, there will be very little, if anything, left for Lysander. It's a sad reality, but I have been diligent in upholding my fiduciary duties." She handed over her meticulously prepared binder, brimming with what she believed was irrefutable evidence of my father's supposed financial woes and her own heroic salvaging efforts. She finished with a flourish, leaning back in her chair, a look of profound pity, and barely disguised schadenfreude, directed at me, a silent sneer. My heart remained calm, a steady drumbeat of purpose. This was it. The culmination of years of preparation, of quiet observation, of unwavering patience. Elias Thorne, who had remained a silent, watchful presence until this point, merely nodded slowly. He didn't even pick up Morwenna's binder, dismissing it with a subtle gesture of disinterest. Instead, he pulled out his own, much thinner, folder, its plain cover belying the power within. "Thank you, Mrs. Davies," he said, his voice quiet but firm, carrying an undeniable weight, "for your comprehensive summary. However, I believe we have a slightly different interpretation of the late Mr. Arthur Davies's estate." Morwenna stiffened, her smirk vanishing instantly, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "Different interpretation?" she scoffed, a brutal laugh escaping her lips. "The figures are quite clear, Mr. Thorne. Facts are facts." "Indeed, Mrs. Davies," Elias replied, his eyes fixated on hers, a laser-like intensity. "And the facts clearly indicate that Mr. Arthur Davies was a man of immense foresight. A man who, understanding certain predilections," his gaze hardened slightly, "took extraordinary measures to protect his true legacy." He then turned to Mr. Davies, the solicitor, who looked increasingly uneasy. "Mr. Davies, would you be so kind as to confirm the existence of the trust account established by Mr. Arthur Davies with the International Fiduciary Bank, account number 747-920XYZ, initiated on March 15th, approximately 3 years ago? Mr. Davies blinked, momentarily flustered, his composure cracking. He rustled through his papers, his brow furrowed with confusion. A trust? With IFE? I don't seem to have any record of that. The will mentions a primary trust, yes, but not specifically with IFE, nor that account number. Morwenna chuckled, a sound devoid of humor, laced with a triumphant, mocking edge. See? This is precisely what I mean. Fabrications. Desperate attempts. Lysander, truly, this is pathetic. Elias merely smiled, a rare, thin smile that didn't reach his eyes, a predator's smile. Ah, but that's where Mr. Davies's genius truly lay. This particular trust, you see, was designed to be virtually invisible to anyone not possessing the precise legal key. It was explicitly established as an inheritance protection trust, with an unbreakable clause that designated Lysander as the sole primary beneficiary, effective immediately upon Mr. Davies's demise, conditional only on a single, specific legal confirmation call initiated by his appointed executor, a call that was to be made only upon discovering a significant attempt to defraud Lysander of his inheritance. He paused, letting the words sink in, each one a hammer blow. Morwenna's face was now pale, the color draining away, leaving her skin a sickly white. Her eyes were wide, dilated with dawning horror, a slow, cold dread seeping into her triumphant facade. And that call, Elias continued, his voice calm, but now carrying the cold, undeniable weight of undisputed authority, was made 5 minutes ago. Your solicitor, Mrs. Davies, if she would be so kind, might wish to check her emails. I believe the confirmation from the International Fiduciary Bank, along with an immediate asset freeze and transfer notification, has just been delivered. Morwenna's junior solicitor, who had been quietly fiddling with her phone, her attention wandering, let out a small, strangled gasp. Her eyes darted to Morwenna, fear replacing her earlier indifference, a stark reflection of the disaster unfolding. She had indeed received the email, her phone buzzing again with another, more urgent notification, a cascade of unrefutable truth. Furthermore, Elias pressed on, unruffled by the sudden, palpable shift in atmosphere, his voice like a gavel striking. The terms of this trust included a clause for immediate audit, an injunction against any party found to have deliberately misrepresented the estate's finances or attempted to divert funds. My client, Mr. Lysander Davies, has meticulously documented every one of your financial adjustments, Mrs. Davies. Every inflated expense, every fabricated loan, every instance of asset liquidation without proper authorization. We have bank statements, digitally authenticated copies of correspondence, and even a recording of a rather revealing phone call you made to a business associate discussing how to legally circumvent the will. My client's expertise as a digital archivist, a profession you so often derided as boring and unprofitable, proved invaluable in this regard. His father, you see, anticipated your every move, leaving a digital breadcrumb trail that only Lysander, with his unique skills and his father's trust, could decipher and piece together. He then did it. The single, precise legal maneuver. Elias didn't even need to make a call then. The call was already made, the trap already sprung, the noose tightened. All he had to do was utter the words, his voice clear and resonant. The trust is activated. The funds are secure. And the forensic audit has begun. Morwenna's jaw dropped, her perfectly made-up face contorting into a mask of disbelief. All the color drained from her face, leaving it a ghostly white. Her eyes darted wildly between me, Elias, and the junior solicitor, who was now frantically scrolling through her phone, her face etched with a mix of disbelief and impending doom. The air was no longer thick with triumph, but with the suffocating silence of absolute, irreversible defeat. The smugness had evaporated, replaced by a cold, numbing dread as her elaborate house of cards crumbled around her. The fallout was immediate and utterly devastating for Morwenna. Her initial shock morphed into a desperate, panicked rage, a primal shriek of a cornered animal. "This is impossible! A trick! He would never! This is a forgery!" she shrieked, pointing an accusing, trembling finger at me, her composure completely shattered, her voice cracking with fury and terror. Mr. Davies, the solicitor, looked utterly bewildered, then slowly, painstakingly, began verifying Elias's claims, his face a picture of dawning comprehension. As the confirmations from the International Fiduciary Bank started to trickle in, first the asset freeze notification, then the confirmation of the trust's immense value, far exceeding anything Morwenna had declared, followed by the immediate legal injunctions against her, Morwenna's face crumpled, tears of impotent rage welling in her eyes. Her junior solicitor, recognizing the swift and inevitable collapse of Morwenna's scheme, wasted no time in self-preservation. She quickly distanced herself, muttering apologies and excuses before making a hasty, almost panicked exit, leaving Morwenna isolated in her public humiliation. Morwenna was left alone, exposed, her intricate web of deceit torn to shreds in a matter of minutes. The realization that she had been comprehensively outmaneuvered, not just by a highly skilled lawyer, but by the quiet, underestimated stepson she had so arrogantly dismissed, was a public humiliation of the highest order, a brand of shame that would follow her. Her eyes, filled with a raw, unadulterated fury, met mine one last time. There was no pity in my gaze, only the quiet, profound satisfaction of justice served, of a promise kept. She had catastrophically underestimated my father, and she had fatally underestimated me. The subsequent weeks were a flurry of legal activity, all of which revolved around Morwenna's agonizing unraveling. The forensic audit uncovered a staggering amount of fraudulent activity, far more extensive than even my father had anticipated. The fabricated debts, the meticulously forged documents, now revealed in their clumsy amateurism, the diverted funds, all meticulously catalogued in my digital archives and now presented as undeniable, irrefutable evidence. Morwenna faced multiple charges, both civil and potentially criminal, the weight of her deceit crushing her. The legal fees alone, combined with the restitution she was ordered to pay from her now frozen assets, left her virtually penniless. She returned to her vague investments, which, it turned out, were far less lucrative than my father's disordered finances. She faded from our lives, not just a cautionary tale of greed and hubris, but a living ghost, a stark reminder of the consequences of underestimating true strength. As for me, the inheritance was secured, and with it, a profound sense of peace. My father's true legacy wasn't just the substantial financial assets he left me. It was the invaluable lessons in wisdom, foresight, and integrity that allowed me to protect it. I invested a significant portion of the inheritance into establishing a foundation in my father's name, dedicated to supporting digital preservation and archival studies, ensuring that others could learn the value of meticulousness and the power of hidden knowledge. I also finally allowed myself the space to pursue my own passions fully, free from the suffocating shadow of Morwenna's machinations. I continued my work as a digital archivist, but now with a deeper purpose, applying my skills to historical preservation and ensuring that truth, even when hidden, could always be brought to light, a silent champion of forgotten facts. Years have passed since that day in the solicitor's office. The memory of Morwenna's collapse is now just a distant echo, a stark reminder of the fragile nature of ill-gotten gains. My life is calm, purposeful, and deeply fulfilling. I learned that true strength isn't about loud declarations or aggressive posturing. It's about quiet observation, meticulous preparation, unwavering conviction, and the strategic deployment of knowledge. Justice, I discovered, isn't always a thunderous roar. Sometimes, it's a single, precisely timed legal maneuver, a quiet unraveling of deceit that makes an entire, elaborate scheme collapse, leaving clarity and peace in its wake. Remember, the true measure of a person's worth is not in what they grasp, but in what they build, protect, and the wisdom they apply, especially when others underestimate them. Never mistake silence for weakness, for often, it is in that quiet space that the most powerful strategies are forged and the most decisive victories are won.